Happy Friday, everyone, and Merry Christmas for this weekend to those who celebrate. We've got some highlight performances to discuss and a couple of teams on opposite sides of the standings to break down in Ottawa and Carolina. Then we look ahead to tonight's games ahead of the holiday weekend. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL.
Your Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NHL for Friday, December 23rd. I am Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here each and every Friday with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. You can find him on Twitter at IceWarsNYRVSNYI. Thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We're free and available on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. Plus, you can watch us over on YouTube. Gil, I would just want to say happy Festivus, first of
Yes,
all. Do you have any grievances to air in the
I
world of
will not air
hockey?
them today. No, and none with you. But how about you? What are your grievances for this year?
Right now, it's the weather, I
Yeah,
would have to say. Lots of the North American continent in a deep freeze right now. We've got some storms affecting the holiday weekend travel. We've got NHL games postponed as a result of them. And I mentioned this on Locked On Flyers, but it directly inconvenienced me and my life with a rescheduled game. So,
yep.
not too thrilled about that. I know it's the weather, but couldn't have asked for worse timing, I think.
Well, what? Temperatures dropping 40 degrees Fahrenheit in 12 hours is just
No
typical,
big.
right?
No big. All right. Well, something that is typical is Alex Ovechkin getting on the scoreboard, and he still has not reached Gordie Howe in the goal standings, but racked another 2 assists last night versus the Ottawa Senators, who we are going to talk about later in the program. But yeah, he continues to try and get to that milestone, and in the meantime reaching other milestones that maybe we hadn't even thought about. He got 6 shots on goal during that game, and so now he's ahead of Ray Bork for most shots on goal by an NHL player.
Yeah, it's an impressive milestone when you think about it, and the list, the top 10 of all time shots on goal. Alex Ovechkin is the only player who's active, and he's the only player who's not in the Hall of Fame on that list. Now, obviously, he's going in as soon as he's eligible, but
Right.
you
Slacker.
look,
Why can't he be there now, right?
yeah, it is a formality. But I mean, you look down the list. You mentioned Bork, Jaromir Jagr, Marcel Dion, Phil Esposito. Although his 5,166 shots probably were only from 5,160 feet out. But if you add them all up, Al McGinnis, Mike Gartner, Gretzky, Brendan Shanahan, and Brett Hull. That's pretty incredible company.
It really is. And you know, I have mixed feelings about Alex Ovechkin just because he's on a division rival from my team, but I think that you really just have to take a step back and put that aside and respect what he has done in his career. And the thing about Alex Ovechkin is that not only is he tremendously skilled, but he is wildly entertaining.
Yes.
And his personality just shines through. And when the Caps won the cup again, I was annoyed, but at the same time watching him take the cup around was just glorious. And I'm so thankful that we at least got one Alex Ovechkin Stanley Cup win, because I think he would have been in the Hall of Fame regardless,
Oh yeah.
obviously, but I do think that that was kind of like a feather on the cap, and that it just sort of needed to happen, right?
It did, and look, barring some catastrophic injury, he is going to pass Gordie Howe shortly. And then,
Hmm.
the question is, can he catch Wayne Gretzky for the all-time goal scoring list? But what an incredible career Alex Ovechkin has had. And he's not done. It's not like he's playing out the string and hanging on just to set another record. He is still an elite player right now, and more
Yeah.
power to him at this point in his career.
Yeah, it is a thing to behold, and you know, part of me does want him to catch Gretzky, and part of me doesn't, just because I feel like Gretzky needs to own something like that, for all of eternity. But for somebody to catch that is going to be an incredible thing should it come to pass. But for now, we've got Gordie Howe on the radar, and we've got one more game before the holiday break for him to see if that happens. We'll talk more about that later in the show. But I do want to talk about the Boston Bruins with a comeback victory. And, David Pastrnak was a huge part of that. And Boston just, the thing about them is not only are they playing tremendous hockey, but they're finding ways to win in many different ways. And it's not just, they've had super decisive wins, they've had close wins, they've had come from behind wins, that there's never a doubt that this team can win a game at any moment.
Yeah, and they could beat you with offense, they could beat you with defense. 1-0 is fine, 5-3 or 6-4 is fine. They have so many different strengths, and on any given night, different players will step up. They can play a different style and still find a way to win. Like you said, comeback wins, not unusual for this team. They're deep, they're talented, and they're hitting on all cylinders right now.
Yeah, and I just, that perfection line drives me crazy, but it's just one of those things that you kind of got to get on board with this season, whether you like the Bruins or not, because I mean, far be it from me to put a curse onto them in some way, but you really hope that it's a team that can continue this through the season and take that into the playoffs. Whether is this like a President's Trophy team that then, fails in the playoffs? I don't want to
Right.
see that, honestly. I just feel like there's this thing with this Bruins team this year that I would hate to see it, peter out in a playoff situation.
Yeah, that's always a thing. And, you have this great regular season and then you end up falling apart. Yeah, first round exit in the playoffs and it's all for naught. But right now, if you're a Bruins fan or just a hockey fan, enjoy
Yeah,
watching this team do what it
no
does. And how
doubt.
about this? 20 consecutive home games this year with at least a point. I mean, you talk about perfection. That's pretty darn close to it.
Yeah, I mean, it must be a really nice thing to buy a ticket for a Bruins game and be like, they're probably gonna win.
Yeah. Imagine that, right?
I know, I know. All right. And one other player that we've talked about on the Friday show a couple of times, but for good reason, is Erik Karlsson. He just continues to make this Sharks season so watchable. And I love that for Sharks fans, because I think that's the ideal situation when you have a terrible team. Like, let's be honest, like when the team is not successful, they're not winning games, you want something to hold on to that's a really strong positive. And Erik Karlsson is that. And so, he gets a 4-point game. And it's just, he just keeps doing it. He has the most 4-point games of any defenseman since he entered the league, which is a while ago now.
Yeah.
So, he's got a 9-game point streak, and I just love watching him play, and it's like a really good reason to watch the Sharks.
It is. He just is spectacular. Scoring just 44 seconds into the game, then gets the primary assist on the next three goals. And, Yeah, he is worth the price of admission. There's no question about that. And then, while we're talking, let's give a shout out to Elias Petterson of the Canucks, who had 5 points and got the shootout winner as the Canucks came back to beat the Kraken in a shootout last night. So those Swedes out west are doing their thing.
They really are. All right. We are going to talk about the Ottawa Senators and the Carolina Hurricanes, who are at opposite ends of the standings in their respective divisions, coming up next.
But first, we have a message from the NHTSA. Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, even your parents can tell. Everyone can tell. So what makes you think law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. Because the bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. And driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI. Paid for by the NHTSA.
Gil, we have two teams that are so far apart in what's happening with them right now, but I think one of them is sort of uh, at expectations or maybe a little higher, and one of them is below expectations. And it's like, do you want the good news or the bad news first?
Well, let's do the bad news first. Get that out of the
All
way.
right. All right. So we have the Ottawa Senators, and I think that it's really interesting with them because they made a lot of really quality moves this off season. Of course, they got DeBrincat, they signed Claude Giroux, and there was, I think, really some hope that the Senators would take a step forward this year. And yet, you look at the standings, they're at the bottom of the Atlantic Division. Now, while they are 5-3-2 in their last 10, they still have been playing pretty uneven hockey recently. And what do you think is going on there, and that they haven't quite gotten it together?
Well, I think, you talked about all the, excuse me, all the changes that this team has made, bringing in DeBrincat, Brady Kachuk. They made a lot of changes in this offseason, and it looks like a couple of things are happening. Number one, they still need a little bit more time to gel. This is still primarily a young team. And we're seeing a lot of inconsistency from them, especially they're struggling to score 5-on-5, which is a little bit of a surprise
Yeah.
when you look at the top line talent on this team. And then I think as a overall team, their defense just isn't where it's supposed to be. Cam Talbot has been okay. Anton Forsberg has been maybe average, but overall, their team defense has just not been as good as expected. And I think there's still a team that's learning how to win. If you're a Senators fan, I think the optimism has to be this. You're only 2 games under NHL 500. Your goal differential is only what, -6. And with a young team, you hope they finish better than they start this year, and that renews the optimism going forward.
Yeah, and they have had a few injuries to deal
Yes.
with, and like, I mean, there's a lot of teams that have had some really severe injuries, so I would say they're kind of mid-level on the injury front. But I do think you're right in terms of them just needing more time to gel, and maybe they need like one or two more pieces. They definitely need it on the defensive side
Yeah.
of things, and I think that's kind of, if I were them and looking to figure out next season, it'll be interesting to see what they do at the trade deadline, because they did take these steps forward, right? So they don't want to give up too many assets, um, that they don't want to sell big at the deadline, I think, because, they are in a good position to move forward, but they're going to have to do something, right?
Yep.
To try and gain space and picks and stuff to keep building on what they're doing. So it definitely is going to be a team to watch at the deadline to see who they decide to hold on to, and what exactly is their core moving forward, right?
Yeah, they are an interesting team to watch at the deadline, and it'll be kind of interesting to see how they approach it. I don't think they're going to be able to get into the playoffs this year. I mean, the Eastern Conference is loaded, but the question becomes, what do they best do to continue building? They're certainly better than they were a year ago, and now the question is, how do you get from, that team that's around 500 to a team that's a real playoff contender?
Yeah, I think that is the ultimate question here. Let's go to the good side of things and talk about the Carolina Hurricanes, who, they have streaked up and are now officially atop the Metro division, overtaking the New Jersey Devils, who, in part of that 7-game win streak, beat those New Jersey Devils 4-1. And, you can talk about the Devils kind of coming back down to earth, but they are 9-0-1 in their last 10. Their one loss was oddly to the Ducks of all teams in overtime. It happens. Everybody has a night. But, I think that you just have to look at them and say, this is a team that is going to start to peak at the right time.
Yeah, and they're doing it with defense. That's the thing.
Yeah.
They're only 23rd in the league in goals scored right now, and yet they've taken over first place in the Metropolitan Division on the strength of their goaltending and their team defense. And you know, for some reason, a lot of people tend to overlook the Carolina Hurricanes. They don't get a lot of media attention. All they do is quietly go out and win hockey games.
Yeah, and they have like really strong offensive players there. That's like even Andrei Svechnikov. Like you just don't hear his name around as much.
Yeah.
Teravainen is really good. And then, I think we've talked about it on this show, but one of my favorite kind of underappreciated players this season has been Brent Burns. I mean,
Hmm.
he has just really created an atmosphere where he can be a good leader on and off the ice and help propel this team. He's a part of their power play first unit, and he's been playing, really good hockey paired up with Jacob Slavin.
Yeah, he really has. And Burns has done it so well for so long. And it's great to see that he can head to a new team, get a fresh start, and still play at this point in his career at a very high level. Is he as good as he was 5 years ago? Probably not, but I think there are 30 other teams that would gladly sign Brent Burns and add him to their roster right now.
Yeah, I think so too. And he's another one of those guys that's a ton of fun to watch. Unfortunately, those Carolina Hurricanes are playing my Philadelphia Flyers tonight. But and in their game last night, Antti Ranta played very well in that game, and so the Flyers are likely to see Kachikov in net. So should be a difficult one for the Flyers, but I do think that it'll be at least fun to watch Carolina play and like get more insight into what these guys do really well, and that's pretty much everything.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're struggling on the power play, but other than that, pretty tough to
Hmm.
beat. And you know, when you have a starting goalie with a goals against average of less than 2, that's a pretty good indication you're going to win most of your games.
Yeah, and the thing is with Carolina is they have a lot of close games. They've had, I think, 17 or 18 one-goal games, but they come out on top on all of them. So it's just one of those things where they know how to shut the other team down at the end of a game if it's close, or they can come back and win. And I think that that's a big part of what makes things difficult for their opponents.
They are disciplined, they are well coached, they know what they have to do. And, you think about how well this team has played over the course of the season and how consistently they've been winning. And yet, you know, 23rd in the league in goals scored, 27th in the league on the power play. The offense is not spectacular, and yet they're 21, 6, and 6. That tells you how good the team defense and the goaltending have been.
Yeah, it's one of those teams where you gotta, win the race to 3 goals, and that's
Right.
the only way you're gonna win,
Yeah.
honestly.
And it's
It's
not
as
easy to
simple as
do for
that.
the opposition.
Yeah, it's like it's a simple thing to think about, but not easy to do in practice. All right. Well, I mentioned the Flyers playing the Canes. We've got a lot more action tonight to talk about, and then World Juniors are around the corner. We will do that next. Gil, we've got a huge slate of games in the NHL coming up tonight because it is the last night of games before the Christmas holiday break. And, the first one, Boston at New Jersey. I think, obviously Boston has that stellar home record. New Jersey is looking to really meet the challenge at this point against a very, very good Boston team. And they've been struggling a little bit. Well, they've been struggling a lot recently.
Yeah,
So I think this is a very important game for the Devils.
it is. And from a Devils standpoint, at least they're at home. Boston's so hard to beat up in Beantown, but the Devils are a talented team, but they're a young team. So now they're facing adversity really for the first time this season after getting off to a hot start. How does this young, talented team handle that adversity going up against Boston in the final game before the holiday break? This is a big test for the Devils. Let's see how they respond.
Exactly. And we mentioned Alex Ovechkin earlier in the program, and tonight is his last shot before the holidays to uh, tie up with Gordie Howe. And the Capitals are hosting the Winnipeg Jets, who are one of the teams that have surprised and delighted this season. And so, given that Washington has kind of righted the ship recently, Ovi's got this extra motivation to give everybody a Christmas present in the fandom. I think, Winnipeg is going to have a tough battle here coming into DC.
They are, and it is not easy for Winnipeg to travel east and be in on the East Coast. Last game before the holiday, but I'll tell you, don't count out the Jets. They have played very well this season. I mean, they actually have a better record than the Capitals, but Washington, as you said, red hot. This should be a great game to watch.
Yes, I think so as well. Gil, your Islanders are facing the Florida Panthers. What's your take on this matchup?
Well, the Panthers have been disappointing this year. They're at NHL 500 after winning the President's Trophy a year ago. A lot of changes in that lineup, but from an Islanders perspective, they played such a sloppy game against the Rangers last night, gave 6 power play opportunities, and you can't do that against a quick, talented team like the Rangers. The Islanders really, really miss Adam Pelech. And, they're a defense first team that's missing one of its top pair defensemen. They don't have the depth to cover it up. The Islanders really need this game, and I don't know if they're going to get it.
I don't know, man. It's going to be a real tough one for them, but I somehow think the Islanders are going to win this one.
Well,
I
I,
just
I
feel
hope
it.
you're right.
I
I
feel it
hope
for
you're
you.
right.
All right. Any other games you're excited about?
Colorado, Nashville. to me looks like an interesting game. The Avs are starting to get a little healthier, but they're still missing some key components. And, you never know which Nashville team is going to show up. One night they look like they could beat anybody in the league, and the next night they look like also ran. So it's in Nashville. I like the rivalry of this game, and I think it'll be an entertaining contest.
Yeah, I think that should be a good one as well. In terms of the late games, we've got Vancouver at Edmonton, and Vancouver has improved, but I don't know if they've improved enough to win against this Edmonton team in Edmonton. I think that's going to be tough for them. Wouldn't count out a Christmas miracle here, but I think that Edmonton will win this one. That is my prediction there. We also have St. Louis at Vegas. And, we have a very similar recent records for these two teams, even though Vegas is atop the Pacific Division, and St. Louis is kind of in the middle of the Central. So I think this will be a really good battle.
I think so too, and Vegas is trying to stay in first place right now in the Pacific. They're 4 points ahead of the Kings, but the Kings are on a 4-game winning streak. So one of the great things about the NHL, there's very little room for error if you want to stay in first place or stay in a playoff spot. You go on a brief losing streak or even a brief run of playing 500, and all of a sudden what was once a comfortable lead evaporates. I'll tell you though, Vegas still a pretty impressive team, especially defensively.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Uh, in addition to the NHL games tonight, we have World Juniors to look forward to that start on Monday on Boxing Day. So, after the dust settles from the holiday break, it's a great chance for everyone to watch their team's prospects who are in the tournament, as well as get maybe what could be your first look at some of the potential draft picks for next year. I know for me, I'm going to be following Team USA pretty closely and Cutter Gauthier there, and then looking at some potential draft picks there. But I am very excited to see this tournament. We've got Connor Bedard playing in it
Yep.
for Team Canada, and who is the presumptive number one overall pick. And so there's a lot of exciting players to keep an eye on. Who you gonna be watching?
Well, look, you want to talk Team USA, you go look at Luke Hughes and Logan Cooley. Those are the two guys that sort of stick out in my mind. And just to sort of add to it, you got Cooley, who's at the University of Minnesota, Hughes, who is at the University of Michigan. Little rivalry there. So, but they're teammates in this case. Lots of great names to watch, though, in this tournament.
Yes, it should be a lot of fun and much better than the last time because it's at its traditional holiday break schedule. And I am very much looking forward to that week or so of action and get to know some kids.
Yeah,
All
it's
right,
always exciting. I love the World Juniors.
that'll do it for today's show. Because of the holiday weekend, Gil will be back Monday with a slightly different format than is usual. But we will be back next Friday to recap the week that was and look ahead to the following weekend slate of games. Once again, I'm Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam, and Gil Martin over here is on Twitter at IceWarsNYR, VSNYI. And have a great weekend, everybody. You made us your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available wherever you get your podcasts.